In 1997, for about 6 months, we lived in Hyde Park, Chicago. I remember one day going into the Rockefeller Chapel. Anyone knows the Rockefeller Chapel? Which is just next to the University of Chicago. It's kind of seen as something like we are to the University of Florida. It's a chapel that is, it's a sanctuary actually. It's like this, it's bigger than this. The Bishop Eaton was installed as presiding bishop in that place 6 years ago, 5 years ago. So it's huge. I remember walking in there as just during the week, as I looked across, I saw this pastor ascend the stairs to the pulpit. It wasn't a Sunday, and he was walking up the stairs and just looking around. So as I got into the sanctuary, I saw him and I said, "So what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm preaching here one of these weeks, so I just wanted to get used to the pulpit. Because it's high up. It's not too high, maybe 4 or 5 steps up." And so I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, great people like the Nobel Peace Prize laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu preach from here, so this is really a fearful pulpit." I didn't say anything, and I'm glad I didn't, because later on I realized, I came to discover that he is a colleague in the Lutheran Church. That same year, I was preaching in residence at the Rockefeller Chapel, so I preached there a few times. And one of the times that stood out most for me was when I spoke about the rise of reason and the fall of truth. And I remember that this was a chapel, or this was a sanctuary that was that had many people who were from the academia. So here I was, first time in the U.S., first few months in the U.S., and I thought I'll try to impress all these academics. As you know, I don't do that anymore. I mean, I don't try. I just do, right? You didn't get that. I'm joking. So I spoke about the age of reason. And I spoke about philosophers from the 18th century, 17th century, like Descartes and Immanuel Kant from the 18th century, and Nietzsche from the 18th century, and their influence on theology, and how reason continued to influence the 20th and the 21st century. And I brought it down to the 20th century, which was when 1997 was. And I spoke about how reason trumps faith. I was getting quite a bit of glares from people, because I was talking about how faith bamboozles reason. That our reason gets in the way of faith so often. One person got up and left. But when we had coffee after that, a few other people came around me and said, "We haven't heard this before." I didn't just end with an academic discussion. I spoke about the gospel and what the gospel means and how it doesn't make sense to the rational mind, and how faith is different because faith believes what it cannot see. And I went on to talk about what the church teaches. And these people said, "We haven't heard this before. We'd like to pay for you to go around the country preaching." And I refused to do that, of course, because that's not why I was there. But the thing that really struck me was how whether they left or didn't leave, how high the number of people were that didn't quite agree with me, that reason doesn't come into the equation. As 21st century Christians, we are influenced by what goes on in the world. And so, the modern world tells us, and the postmodern world as they call it now, I don't know who calls it those things, but you know, it went from the age of reason in the 18th century to the Enlightenment and all that came after that. In the postmodern world, people are wanting, they're striving to explain our faith so that others will grasp it. If we really think about it, it's a temptation. It's a temptation that we as Christians have to stray from the truth. Trust me, those that want us to stray from the truth have an inkling of truth. Someone once said that every heresy started with the truth. Every heresy has an inkling of truth. People won't grasp something if it's not true, if it looks ridiculous. But they'll grasp it if it has some semblance of what is true. Jesus was in the wilderness and he had been starving or fasting for a long time. And the devil wanted to tempt him. So the devil did say, I know you're hungry. That was reasonable, right? If you fasted for 40 days, you will be hungry. And so he said, you know, you are the Son of God, and so you can do miracles, so why don't you take this stone and make it into a loaf of bread so you can eat? That's what heresy is. Taking something that is otherwise understood in the world. Here was Jesus who can do miracles. Here was Jesus who was the Son of God. So why not have him turn stone into bread and then eat it? We don't get something that is totally outside of our experience, totally outside of what we call the voice of reason, or reasonable, when we are tempted to go outside the line. By the way, I just have to plug this, for those of you that were around in 1985 when We Are the World was a big hit. You remember that? USA for Africa it was called, right? Anyone remembers Willie Nelson? You remember how he lied to the world? What did he say? Ask God to show us by turning stone to bread, so we must give a helping hand. Something like that, right? Jesus didn't turn stone into bread. It won a Grammy or something like that with that lie. Like I said, I'll just make a plug for that. That's nothing to do with the sermon too much. The devil also knew Scripture. And so the devil tried to use Scripture to get to Jesus. This is an interesting angle that the devil was using. When he said, I'm just trying to find my reference. Then he said to him eventually, Jesus quoted Scripture. So Jesus was saying, it is written, one does not live by bread alone. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 3. And then when he offered him, the devil offered him all of the the glories of this world. Once again, it was Jesus came to restore the kingdom. That's what everyone said. So why don't I give him the whole kingdoms of this world so that it will help him restore the kingdoms? So it will be right up his street. It will be something that he wants to do, something that is right up his mission. So the devil said, come bow down and I'll give it all to you. When we are tempted by this world, by the devil and the agents of this world, of the devil, we are tempted based on something that is dear to us, something that is not foreign to us, something that we can understand, something that to us will be the voice of reason. The devil was getting nowhere, and so the devil decided to quote scripture too. He was quoting Psalm 91, 11 to 12. He says, come up to the top of the temple, then throw yourself down. Now, you are not attacking, but you are speaking against the religious order of the day. So, what better way to go up the temple and fall down from there, and then God will save you so that you can prove that you are better and that you are superior, that you have the message from God that is greater than what the leaders of the temple had. Then he quotes Psalm 91 by saying, he will command his angels concerning you to protect you. On their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against the stone. Is that a true scripture? Yes, it is. It came from the religion that Jesus grew up with, the Jewish religion. The devil was quoting the Torah. So often, when there's deception in the church, scripture is used. I like to say misused to support a heresy. It's interesting that Jesus responded by going back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, saying, do not put the Lord your God to the test. The way we deal with, the way we respond to heresy, to untruths, to things that will lead us astray, is to look at what God is saying in God's Word. For many people, reason has become the explanation for theological precepts. That's the fight we have in this world. The voice of reason is trying to convince everyone based on a different frame of reference. A frame of reference that is in society. A frame of reference from a society that we are part of. It's not foreign. When you're in America and the enemy is trying to convince you to be led astray from the truth of Scripture, the enemy is not going to quote the religions of the deepest part of Africa or the East. The enemy is going to quote something that we can identify with as a society. You will hear that there's someone from the Lutheran Church who is calling for some kind of free living where you can go out with anybody. You don't need to be faithful to your spouse. That person is under scrutiny right now because this person is a well-known Lutheran pastor. Besides it being against Scripture, it's outside our cultural mores and norms. But if you listen carefully to those that support this person, they talk about what used to happen in the Old Testament. Remember I spoke about David and his many concubines and different wives. They talk about how ancient cultures used to live in polygamous relationships. It's not going down too well, thank God, because it's outside of what is reasonable in modern society in the USA. We'll see where that goes. But when the tempter wants to lead us astray, the tempter deceives us by the voice of reason. I was having a conversation with some pastors not so long ago, and we were talking about the fundamentals of our faith, not just as Christians, but particularly as Lutherans. And I was quite shocked to hear that it was difficult for these Lutheran pastors to accept that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And that no one will come to the Father except through Christ. I must say, and I say this with as much humility as I can, yet with as much boldness as I need to, because Scripture tells us, our creeds tell us, our theology tells us that Christ is the way. That's what separates us, that's what distinguishes us from other religions. But we appeal, well, those that will lead us astray, appeal not to Scripture, but to the voice of reason in this world. With the rise, to go back to that sermon at Rockefeller Chapel, with the rise of reason and the continual secularization of society and religion, we are forced to, whether we like it or not, inadvertently we are forced to use reason as our frame of reference and not Scripture. And so we are led astray. The devil did the same. The devil tried to use the voice of reason. Reason based on the Hebrew Scriptures. Reason based on who Jesus claimed to be. Reason based on the purpose of Jesus in the world. So we need to be careful that we are not led by the voice of reason, because the voice of reason is deceptive. The voice of reason is appealing to something that is logical, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with truth. Sometimes it does, so let's not throw reason out of the window. But very often it isn't. We live in a society where equality is a big thing. And so sometimes we appeal to those moral values, equality and justice, to help us understand our faith, to the point that we compromise our faith. So people would say, and we cannot say they don't have salvation in the other faiths. We cannot say that if someone is good, they won't be saved. And a few Lutherans in the house, most of you. We know that our works cannot save us. And so on what basis do we say that if someone is good, they will be saved? On the basis of a nebulous moral value in society today that says that there's a fairness factor that needs to be taken into account when we understand our faith. There are many voices around, and some lead us astray. God's voice is the voice we declare when we hear our baptismal vows, and our faith is confessed through the creeds, when we read Scripture, when we go through confirmation, if you still remember that, when you do Bible study. God's voice is heard. And God calls us into His bosom. God calls us out of the world, but into the world to do our mission there. And so let's hold fast to the faith and not be waylaid by the voice of reason, because it cannot be trusted in this enterprise of faith. Amen.